Okay, let's dive right in, ladies. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have Julia Baker and Sarah King with me today. We're going to be talking the ins and outs of corrective exercise, occupational therapy, and of course, cycle syncing. I'm Jenny Swisher. I'll be your host for today, as usual. I'm excited to talk to these ladies. I've been working with these ladies for well over a year now in my sync course. I know that they have some really awesome, unique experiences and some really incredible credentials behind their names. I'm going to give you just a little bit of an overview before we dive into sort of a Q&A. Sarah is a registered occupational therapist. She is a postpartum and pregnancy corrective exercise specialist. She has her Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the University of Indianapolis and her master's in occupational therapy from the University of Indianapolis. She's also recently sync certified in my program, so she's very well aware of women's hormone health and how to sync with your cycle. She's also a mother of 3 girls. So I just realized the 3 of us all are girl moms. So we have that in common as well.
That's great.
Awesome. Julia is a registered occupational therapist as well. She is a postpartum and pregnancy corrective exercise specialist. She has her bachelor's in health science and a sociology minor in psychology from Bradley University and her master's in occupational therapy from the University of Indianapolis. I'm assuming maybe you guys met at the University of Indianapolis. Is that correct?
Actually,
Nope,
no,
we didn't.
No. Okay. You had that in common. So have you known each other longer?
We have not. We actually met about 6 years ago through our church moms group.
Awesome.
And we do both have degrees from the University of Indianapolis, but we were there at different times, so our paths did not cross.
Wow. That's incredible.
I do
Okay.
think it's something that we had in common, though, that helped us to become friends. It's just something easy to talk about together.
Well, I love following these ladies on social media. We'll talk more about how you can follow them toward the end of the episode. But they've created a cool little partnership here, and I'm excited to kind of dive into what they have to offer. I know that they have an upcoming course launching. So that's going to be exciting. By the time this podcast launches, the course will be live. So we'll definitely be sure to direct everybody there. But I'm just going to kind of open it up to you guys and let you guys tell us more about sort of your journey, like what led you to where you are now. Tell us a little bit about your life in general, as being moms and whatnot, but also about sort of your background in occupational therapy.
Sure. Julia, you want to start?
Sure. I graduated from occupational therapy school in 2010. And then my husband and I actually moved to Savannah, Georgia, shortly after I graduated. And we found out during the move that I was pregnant. And so I was pregnant for the first time in a brand new city and state and starting my first full-time job. I worked on a rehab unit where I worked primarily with patients with stroke, back surgery, or cardiac problems. And I really, really enjoyed, I work with the geriatric population. I really enjoyed that. But I had my daughter in 2011, and then I had another daughter in 2013, and then I had another daughter in early 2016. And so I ended up deciding that I wanted to stay home. And it is kind of funny because I make jokes sometimes that occupational therapy, we work with the things that occupy people's daily lives. So I always say what occupies your time, and that's different for everybody. And then we look at what occupies your time and we help you to do those things if you have some kind of injury or dysfunction. And then what we're trying to do at InFORMed Fitness is to try and help you do those things better in your daily life before you have some kind of injury or dysfunction. But I do sometimes joke that occupational therapy, because a lot of the things are basic living skills, things like being able to bathe yourself, dress yourself, get on and off a toilet by yourself, being able to cook meals, do your daily tasks. And sometimes I joke that occupational therapy and being a mom are not that different because you're at home and you're teaching your children to bathe themselves and dress themselves and to do potty training and things like that. I actually was not a very active person. And then after I had my third baby, I decided that something had to change. So I decided to start my fitness journey. And I really wish that I would have gotten some more help then. So I started I I think we'll talk about this a little more lately, but that's really what directed me towards learning so much more about postpartum and pregnancy corrective exercise.
Yeah. And in some ways, my story is a little bit similar to Julia's. I graduated from the University of Indianapolis in 2005, moved to North Carolina 3 years later, and was there for 5 years, had my first child away from home. At the same time, was dealing with chronic pain in my hip. I was an athlete all through high school and through college, through the shot put, javelin, discus. And that was a lot of wear and tear on my left hip. So trying to kind of shift from being an athlete to working out for life, at the same time being the breadwinner for my family and traveling. And I was in management for occupational therapy at that time, and just really was lost in how to figure out where fitness fit in my life at that point.
Gotcha. So you, so let's talk, because you've had, I think I know you well enough to know, like you've had the hip surgery and you've kind of been through all of that. And as someone who's suffered with chronic pain myself, I know how miserable that can be. And so what would you say, like, was that really, did, you know, when you were going through that process, did you feel like, you know, someday I'm going to come back even stronger and I'm going to keep fitness part of my life, or kind of how did that get reintroduced for you? Because obviously you were an athlete. How did that injury sort of play a role?
Yeah, it took a lot of time and an effort on my part, and it was really it was difficult because here I was as an occupational therapist, and I was working with people and encouraging them to exercise, but yet I was struggling in my own life to find exercise that worked for me. And there was a lot of trial and error. I saw some physical therapists for myself. I tried the pain injection route and did everything that I could, because at the time I was in my early 30s and no doctor would do a hip replacement until I was well into my 30s or even later. And so it was a lot of trial, a lot of error, a lot of frustration, that I eventually landed with a cycle bike and at-home fitness programs. And then after that, we moved to Fort Wayne, and I started to get more active in our local Y. And that's when Julia and I met. And we had this, not only do we have this occupational therapy as common, but we had this fitness struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they were different, they were both struggles, and it was something that we could share and commiserate with
Mm-hmm.
each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell me more about, when it comes to especially women and corrective exercise, what are some common things that you guys see when working with women? What are some common issues that need correcting?
I think what happens that people don't really realize is that there are certain patterns that our bodies fall into, that especially if you have been pregnant. But you can do it, you can fall into these patterns just by living a Western lifestyle. We have a tendency to adjust as our bodies grow a baby, and we tend to have where our like ribs will flare and we'll go ahead and tilt our pelvis forward to make room. Well, then we have this baby, and our body has been doing that for so long that we don't correct back into a good body alignment. And when we don't correct back into a body alignment, that's what leads to a lot of things like back pain. It can increase leakage, urine leakage if you have problems. It can get shoulder pain, those kinds of things. It's really important to look at how the body is moving as a whole and what needs to be strengthened, but also what might need to be shifted so that we can use our exercising to actually get into a good pattern that will decrease pain.
Mm-hmm.
And not only decrease pain, but then carry over into our daily lives. Because as you know, Jenny, that our fitness is just a sliver of the time that we spend moving our bodies on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do all the corrective exercise in the gym, but if that's not carrying over for you in your functional life, well, lifting up a baby or running a vacuum or emptying the dishwasher, then those poor patterns are going to continue to stay, as are the pain and discomfort associated with them.
It's about using good body mechanics, not just when you deadlift, but also when you garden, and also when you are walking around your house or doing your daily tasks, because in the long run, we spend maybe an hour in the gym and then we spend 12 hours at home doing other things. So you get more impact when you have good body mechanics throughout your entire day.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because when I went through a total of 4 neck surgeries in my 20s, which at the time we thought were contributing. My neck was contributing to my headaches at the time. Now we know it was hormonal. But at the time I went through a lot of these surgeries and of course was referred to a physical therapist. And for me, it was also around that time that I was introduced to home fitness programs and sort of fitness and nutrition in general. And I learned so much during that short time just on what I would consider to be somewhat corrective exercise. Like I remember working with him on a lot of resting positions for me. Like a lot of my resting positions, for example, like sitting at the computer at my corporate job, I wasn't sitting ergonomically correct. I was kind of lounging my legs forward and slouching my back. And it was, of course, impacting my neck and everything as well. So just little things like that I think a lot of people aren't aware of. Now that I'm a mom with my first child, who's now 5, I never had any back issues. And of course, both of my girls are adopted. So I didn't have birth. I didn't have that sort of experience. But we were at the beach when she was about 9 months old. And I made the mistake of sort of, I guess you could call it a deadlift. I dipped her toes into the ocean. I even have it on video because it was her first time being dipped in the ocean, and my legs were locked. And I'm guessing she was around 20 pounds or so. And my back gave out. And that was the beginning of sort of this roller coaster lower back experience that I've had ever since. And now that I have a 9-month-old, again, I'm seeing, wow, I carry her on my right hip all the time. So no wonder I'm a little off, and I see my husband, he's been doing the same thing. He'll say, I think I carry her on my left. So I'm a little bit out of whack. So it's funny because I think, when I think about personal training, I think about when I was in the gym, especially, I could look at somebody and say, okay, we're going to do a squat, right? And they would watch me do it with really great form. Like I would show them the perfect form and technique for a squat. And I would say, okay, feet hip distance apart. And without even looking down at their feet, they would flare their feet out or flare their feet in. They thought that their feet were underneath their hips, but they were. We call this proprioception, right? And so instead, you get this thing that's really not at all like a squat, but they think that they're doing what you're doing, right? And so I think in general, people in general just have sort of a lack of awareness of different things that their body's doing because it is natural to them, whether it's those resting positions or not. So I love what you guys are doing. I think this is awesome. I remember when I went through my personal training certifications and such, it happened to be that the guy that facilitated it was he specialized in corrective exercise. So I got a little bit of a taste for that when I went through that. And I love learning more. So let me ask you a little bit more specifically, like, what do you think is most overlooked as it pertains to women's fitness? I'd love to hear your take on that.
When Sarah and I were both going through our postpartum and pregnancy corrective exercise course, the impact that breathing has and how we breathe, the impact on everything that we do was mind blowing.
Yes.
I think that so many things could be corrected if we just learned to breathe properly. In our course, we actually do an entire module on breathing, and we talk about how breathing should happen and different exercises to get breathing better. Because the thing that is overlooked with breathing is, first of all, so many of us have our ribs completely locked down. There are bad cues out there, and they're well-intentioned cues, but there are so many places where, you go through some kind of relaxation or whatever, and people take a nice deep breath into your belly. And I can understand the sentiment. I really can. But honestly, you're not doing anything for the quality of breathing, just breathing into the belly. And honestly, if you have like a weaker core, if you have a diastasis or something like that, you could be making that problem worse. So I think that it's really, really underrated to not just go to the basics of breathing, because breathing will help you have better mobility. It can expand places where you have shortened muscles or where you are tight. It can help you with your leaking, because there's an upper system of breathing. So you've got you've got your lungs and your diaphragm, and everybody talks about how when your diaphragm goes down, your lungs expand, and your diaphragm comes up and your lungs go down. What people aren't realizing is there's a lower half to that system. And in the lower half of that system is where, when your diaphragm, descends, your pelvic floor should also be descending. And then when it comes up, your pelvic floor should also be coming up. And you have to make room for your body pressure, or for your abdominal pressure, And that is when we lead to so many problems, is when we can't manage the pressure. So I think that really breathing gets highly, highly overlooked.
Absolutely. And speaking on that pressure management piece, I think that's a word that I'm hearing more often, is you've got to learn to manage your pressure. Well, yes, you do, but you have to understand the mechanics in order to manage that pressure. It's not enough to breathe properly during a squat or during a deadlift, but also to manage that pressure in your daily life, so that when you do bend over to put your child in the ocean, you're using your breath to help support you, because what will happen is that pressure is going to find the path of least resistance. And so, like Julia said, if that happens to be in your core, it's going to come out through the diastasis. If that happens to be in the pelvic floor, it's going to come out as urine leakage. And there's this phenomenon right now in sport that women leak when they're lifting. And just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. And so that's one of those myths that we want to bust, is that you can lift correctly and heavily without leaking. Leaking is a source or an indication of a deeper problem.
Well, I want to ask a couple of questions about this. I hope it's okay to kind of go off the cuff here with some of this stuff, but I'm fascinated by this diastasis recti and the pelvic floor dysfunction. I know for me personally, having been in the personal training world, it was pretty common for me to meet with women who said, "Oh, I can't do core exercises because I have diastasis." I'd love to hear, what do you guys say to that when someone says, "I've recently delivered a baby, I'm dealing with diastasis, I can't do crunches," right? Like, what do you guys say to that? How do you address that?
So I think the short answer is that we're all different, and we all our bodies are going to respond differently. So a blanket statement of "don't do this because you have this" is never the answer. I still have separation in my abs, but I know how to manage my pressure, so I can do some of those exercises that I couldn't do earlier when I wasn't able to manage my pressure well. So it's really looking at the individual person and how they're able to work through a move or understand what their body is doing in a particular move, as to whether that is a good move for their body or not.
I think a lot of it comes down to how much time you're willing to spend on education. And then, of course, how much the person retains, which you can only control so much of that. But it's a lot simpler. It may be simpler, but I don't think it's the right way to just give somebody a blanket rule of like, don't do crunches. But it takes more time to educate somebody on, okay, we need to be looking at, are you doming? Do you have it? Like, is your split widening? Like, what kinds of things you need to be doing and actually problem solve, and educate. Now, I do think that there are good substitutions out there, but here's the thing about substitutions. Somebody who's told that they can't do crunches can just as easily go out and do a dead bug terribly, okay, and be having the same exact problem. And so just giving hard and fast rules of well, just don't do crunches. And we all know that old information dies hard, right? So I think that it just takes a long time and it's happening. I see it happening, but for more of that education to get out there, because I use home fitness programs also. And I feel like they could do better work in teaching modifications, but I think that there is just this gap between therapy and training. And there's this little space in between where people need to know how to work back up to that high intensity exercise.
Mhm.
And that gap is not being met. And that's, that's a goal of ours, is to try and fill some of that gap.
Absolutely.
I love that you said that. I remember, all three of us are home fitness people. And I remember there was a program years ago where the trainer that led the program, actually, she did the modifications. So she was the one teaching the program, teaching the modifications from the front of the quote unquote stage, right? Or right in front of the camera. And then she had, I forget what they called it. It was like an amplifier or something. Instead of having a modifier, it was like, we're going to have somebody who's going to do the more extreme version next to her. And I was like, that's so needed. That's so needed, because I know for me, even when I just hurt my back a couple of times in the last few years, like I mentioned, there have been times where when I come back into exercise after, being in that place of rest and recovery, I follow the modifier, and I'm always blown away at how good of a workout I'm getting. And in a lot of cases, how I'm like, oh, I don't even think I was doing that right at the amplified level. Like I'm deeper in my lunge this way, or I feel it more where I'm supposed to feel it this way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's something to that for sure. Well, yeah, go ahead.
That makes me think of two things. One, I think that it's great when they show modifications, but that there needs to be more education of why you might need a modification, signs you might need a modification.
Yes.
Because somebody can go out there and do something and be like, well, it doesn't hurt and I'm not leaking, so it must be okay. But that is not necessarily the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, this whole idea that modifications are less than.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't, talk about driving me crazy. Like, modifications are honoring your body. Like, that's absolutely, what your body needs. And you're going to get greater gains if you meet your body where it's at than if you push it and then have an injury that you can't come back from.
Yeah. When I used to stand in front of I used to do small group personal training, and I would stand in front of a group of women, and I always had two types of women. I had the type that was like, I'm just going to say balls to the wall. Like, they're going to do the jump lunge squats, and a lot of times they're just wanting to blow through it. So they're not even going deep into their lunges. They're just blowing through the exercise for 30 seconds. And then you've got the person on the other end of the extreme who's doing a strength exercise, who's lifting 2-pound weights and doesn't want to go any greater because she's afraid she's going to bulk up. Right. So there's like these two extremes of like the person afraid of strength training and the person who's just balls to the wall, but they're not really getting much out of it because they're not doing it with correct form. So
I think that speaks to mindset, and that is something else that we cover in our course. And it's something that I had to really work on, shifting from that athlete mentality to, like I said earlier, the everyday health mentality. And I got to be honest with you, when I first started doing corrective exercise for myself, I thought, golly, what a waste of time. I didn't even sweat. Like, I always associated how much I was sweating to the effort that I was putting into the exercise. And I have since learned it's not about the sweat. It's about getting my body in that good alignment and contracting the muscles how they're designed to work, so that then I can carry that over outside of the gym and not just be depleted. I remember, doing exercise and then just not being able to function the rest of the day because I was so depleted from that particular workout.
Chasing the calorie burn.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
I monitor my heart rate now, not my calorie burn.
Yes, as you should. Okay. Well, let's talk more about sort of your health and fitness journeys. What, if anything, what would you tell yourself? What would you tell the 20 something Sarah or the 20 something Julia, if you could look back on that?
Yeah. I think that I would absolutely offer myself more grace. I don't think that I really understood the level and intensity of pain that I was experiencing on a daily basis. I just knew that I was frustrated because I couldn't, there were times when I couldn't carry groceries up the stairs because my hip was hurting so bad. But yet I had this voice in my head that says, you have to work out, you have to work out, you have to work out. And so I would go back and counsel that Sarah and say, this is what you need. You need that corrective exercise. You need to get that hip in good alignment before you ask the muscles to do any more work. Because I am it'll be 6 years in October post total hip replacement, and I am still working on muscle imbalances from that journey. So grace, and then allowing myself to pick programs that fit where I'm at in my life, and being okay with not doing what the calendar says today is supposed to be. Are the two of my biggest takeaways.
Yeah. What about you, Julia?
Well, so I'm sometimes now I get almost embarrassed to say, like, I didn't actually start being active until I was 30. So I was the band geek in high school. Actually, I was in the color guard, even better. And so I was plenty active, and, my metabolism was crazy because I was a teenager, and everything was, if it was all just about the body image, but like, I never really learned like how to put a program together, or I knew how to rehab patients, right? But I didn't know how to do a basic fitness program. And so it finally just had to reach this point. I had 3 babies in 5 years. And it really, for me at that time, was a weight loss thing. And, I just decided that I was going to start running. I wish that I could go back and I could tell my 30-year-old self to go ahead and invest in some more coaching and some more help on what I actually needed, which at the time was probably either some pelvic floor PT or something like postpartum corrective exercise. And I needed to know that I needed strength training. I needed to know, but like, I would never have considered strength training because I didn't know how to strength train. And that's really, a lot of times when Sarah and I have been working on our foundations course that's launching soon, we have written it for the 30-year-old Julias that are out there, because by the time you are 30, you have thought to yourself, oh, I really need to get more fit. Oh, I really need to exercise more. But you look around and you see these women that have been exercising forever and already know. And so you're scared. Although honestly, I have found those women to actually be quite helpful once I finally said that I needed some help. But from the outside looking in, it's very scary, right? And so, or sedentary, like their life is on a spectrum, and you saw the two extremes, and it was hard to find my way in. So for me, it was cheaper and easier, and like anybody can run. So, so I bought a 99-cent app and I did a couch to 5K, and I don't regret any of that, by the way, because I actually do enjoy running. But I immediately had knee pain, and I don't know if I was leaking then or not. I probably didn't pay a lot of attention to it. And I was a young mom with 3 young children, and I was nursing, and I was doing all these things. I was being really hard on my body. And I wish that I had somebody out there to be like, okay, like, let's look at our mindset, and let's first work on our breathing. And, strength training is really important. Here, I'll show you how to do it. And so as we have gone through this journey of doing so like I took the 5 years and think to myself, like, what are all the things that happened to me in those 5 years that I could save somebody some time? And hope, because a lot of people, I tend to have kind of a stubborn personality. So I kept going, but I could see where a lot of people could have experienced some of the difficulties that I experienced and quit. And I don't want people to quit. I want people to have a warm community where they can ask the questions that you feel that you feel are stupid questions, and to get feedback from somebody who says, yes, you are doing it right. Because sometimes we all need a little hand holding.
Absolutely.
And that's why InFORMed Fitness, I'm pretty passionate about InFORMed Fitness and our foundations course. And I'm really hoping that there are some women who have wanted to try something, but have maybe not felt empowered. And we want to empower those women.
Yeah, I love what you guys are doing. I think that the online courses are so powerful because there's an element to them that's, a a mom at home with 3 littles who might not want to make time to go to an occupational therapy appointment necessarily can access your material online and learn so much and start the process of progress. Right. So, I love what you guys are doing, and I want you guys to share that information here shortly. So before we wrap up, what I wanted to ask specifically is, I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's funny because I'm instantly thinking of 2 different friends that I have. Both are mothers who have given birth. The first one is a friend of mine who was a marathon runner. She liked doing home fitness and working out at the gym, sort of just an all around fitness lover. She delivered her second child and started having some pelvic floor diastasis issues. And while I wasn't super involved in that process with her, I do know just from being a friend that she was blown away when she started working with someone who was a pelvic floor specialist, how much progress she could make doing the corrective exercises as opposed to really just getting back to fitness, right? And skipping the crunches. And then my other friend that I'm specifically thinking about is someone who had their baby and came back fully expecting themselves to be able to dive into sort of the intense exercise that they were doing before. And was even, at times like my friend that had done the pelvic floor had even mentioned to her, have you thought about doing corrective exercise for pelvic floor? And she said, no, I'm just going to keep doing what I've always done. I'm just going to keep doing the exercise. And to this day, I see the difference in the 2 women. I see the difference in their cores, but of course I also see the difference in their movements and what they value and sort of, so I'm saying that really with no question behind it, but I just wanted to share, like, I have seen the two routes be taken. And I think that there is so much power in what you guys are doing. There's so much power in taking control of your health. And sometimes it is doing the things that might feel slower or that might feel like it's not progress, but it's worth it to not injure yourself. And if the ultimate goal, I'm really passionate about making sure that women are aligning themselves with their physiology, and for us to be pushing ourselves through carrying groceries up the stairs and hip pain because we have too much pride or whatnot to see an occupational therapist is just not, it's just
Ding,
not
ding,
cool. Yeah, exactly. So, okay. So both of you guys, like I mentioned at the beginning, both of you guys have taken my sync digital course where you guys have learned all about syncing your cycles with your fitness nutrition with your cycles. What would you guys say has been your experience in the course? Like, what are some standout things that you guys have learned? How are you applying some of that to what you're teaching? I'll leave it up to you to answer that.
Absolutely. So the sync course was for me the course that I was looking for. Julia and I had started having these conversations about our exercises, and I distinctly remember for myself, there were a couple of days where I would do my lifting at home, and then I would go and do a 60-minute cycle class at the Y within 20 minutes of each other. And I felt amazing. And the next week I tried to do it and I was like, what is wrong with me? But I didn't know why. And Julia was experiencing some of those same things. And Jenny, you had shared about the book Roar. And so we dove into that book. I started reading it, and I'm sure Julia can tell you that I ran over here and I was like, Julia, they have a book about what we're talking about. And then eventually, you were in the process of creating the sync course. So I was like, sign me up, first one to register for it, kind of thing. And what I learned was the same thing that we're trying to empower women through movement is to honor our bodies and where they're at and how they're so very different from men and the men-based programs that are for general audiences. And again, that complete mindset shift of it's okay not to do what the calendar tells you to do, to listen to your own body, to honor your body, and then to be open to different areas. Like I am currently working with an integrative medicine practitioner, and not having taken your course, I would have never reached out to that field. But I'm learning so much about, how my gut is being affected by the foods that I'm eating. And it's very different from what a lot of general nutrition programs are suggesting. So just that wealth of knowledge, and then being able to apply it to our work life and to our just daily life, what we're consuming, what our fitness program looks like, and how our really how everything is surrounded by that cycle.
So when I started exercising, I had a 2-month-old and my cycle had not returned. And I have breastfed all of my children. And I am one of these ladies that is gifted with, 14, 15 months typically, although the story is funny that way, of not having my cycle come back. Well, my cycle came back early. We didn't kind of figure that out. So then Briella hit the scene. So essentially, when I started exercising when I was 30, I actually didn't ovulate or have a period until I was for 3.5 years. For 3.5 years, I didn't, because I there wasn't anything wrong. It was just from breastfeeding amenorrhea. But when my period came back, and because of the way that I had my children, I had like 3 periods in like 8 or 9 years. And so I felt like a teenager again. I was like, I don't even remember how this works. But I definitely noticed, I had worked my way up. There was one summer where I was just feeling kind of crazy, and I decided I wanted to do sprint triathlons. So I was sprint triathlon training, and in 1 week I would feel amazing, like I would feel really great. And then 2 weeks later, I would run the same course or swim the same number of yards or bike the same exact course. And I would feel like I was going to fall off the bike. Like I just really, really felt terrible. And it would be 2 weeks later. So I would be like, why is this happening? Why am I getting worse? Training is supposed to make me get better. Like, what is happening here? And it was interesting, because since I had been tracking my cycles for 10 years, I did say to Sarah, I was like, I think there might be something about my cycle that is affecting me. And it was pretty funny. I remember she showed up at my door and she was like, this is exactly what you were talking about last week, kind of thing. So we ate up that book. And then it took me a little while to have space just in my life to come and take the sync course. But I think what the sync course helped me with was 2 things. It helped me with my mindset, because like I said, if that had kept happening, right? Like if every 4th week my workouts were awful, like maybe I just would have, been like, it's not helping. I give up, and 2, now I have forgotten 2, practical application, like actually being able to work in where I should do, I've shifted my focus more to strength training, because I think that's really important for my body as I go on. But at that time, I did start to adjust my training schedule to honor my cycle.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you guys shared that, because it's been an honor to have you guys in the course itself. And I know it's funny, because I was just talking to somebody who also recently got sync certified as a sync certified coach. And she is actually going to be speaking to her husband as a high school basketball coach, girls basketball coach, I should mention. And she is going to be speaking to the girls basketball team about what she's learned about women's hormones. And it was interesting, because we were sort of having a phone call about this. And she mentioned, that her goal for this conversation is to make the girls aware of the fact that their body will feel different week to week, that they could have a good game or a bad game. And it's not necessarily because of their skill, ability, or effort. It could be a hormonal related reason that that they're feeling the way that they do. And I thought that was so powerful, because as we know, and as we talk about in the course, especially in your teenage years, it's a little bit different, because your body's trying to figure itself out. And I can remember being a high school basketball athlete, and it was the exact same thing. Like I would have, of course, I was always a migraine sufferer. So I would have games where I was in migraine, HE double hockey sticks. And I would have games where I felt like I was just on top of the world and totally focused and in the game and high energy. And so looking back, I'm pretty sure there were probably some hormones playing a role there. So how powerful is it that we can spread the message to everyone about the power of cycle syncing. So I'm so grateful for you guys doing this with me today. I'd love for you guys to direct people to where they could find you. Where can they find you on social media? And also, how can they get into your course? If you could share that with us.
Sure. We hang out on Instagram and Facebook. Both are at InFORMed Fitness LLC. And then our website is informedfitnessllc.com. And that website has information about our course. Our first cohort will be launching mid-September. And we are truly excited about sharing the knowledge that we've learned and empowering women to, take control of their own movement and health journeys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Well, I'll make sure that all of that information as far as social and website and whatnot is all included in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, feel free to check out the show notes for those direct links. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I'm so grateful and I'm so glad to be friends with both of you. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.